This is Chapter 12, Getting Organized to Observe. So ECE professionals must nourish their observation skills so that they can appreciate who the children are, they can capture the details and their connections with other details, they can enrich the environment and the curriculum, they can provide professional development for themselves, and they can deepen their relationships with the children. Because the more you know, the more informed and committed you are to the children. We need to determine what observation formats work best for us, but make sure that we observe regularly and as the children go through their daily routines, that we do it in a consistent format, and that might be using Post-it sticky notes, using your tablet, using a spiral binder. We have to make sure it's filed quickly so that we don't lose it and we keep it organized. We want to make sure that we capture important moments and that we're tracking the children's development and learning. And then we have to consider, do we work by ourselves because we're the only adult in the classroom, or are we part of a team? If we're part of a team, then we have to coordinate together. So documentation, focus, goals, and objectives should be considered as we gather the documentation. And you can find some more information about this on page 211 of your textbook. Is our focus, our goal and objectives to show this documentation to the children? Is it to show it to the families? Is it to use for assessments? Is it to be used in portfolios? Also, we need to consider the different perspectives and the details of that. And so in your book on page 221, they have a technique for capturing the details from different perspectives in regards to our observations. And we're going to use this technique for our assignment number 1. And so it's called 4 Perspectives to Consider in the Observation Story. And so we have 4 columns in this table. There's the child's story, and there are 6 items in this column. And the first one is, what is the child doing with the materials? The second column is the learning and development story. And here there are 8 items. And the last item has 6 domains. And so we want to make sure that we consider all those domains as well. So here's the first question. How does this activity relate to things you have seen before? The third column is the teacher's story. And there are 7 items here. And the first one is, what were you curious about as you watched and listened? And the last column is the family's story, and there are 4 items there. How might this play reflect the family's beliefs, values, and perspectives? And so they've not only given you this format technique, but there are 2 examples of documentation that has used this technique to consider the different perspectives. You can find these on page 223 and 225, and the observation stories that they've utilized are also in that format. And it's a good idea to look at those because that's what we're going to be using for our assignment number 1. And so here's your assignment number 1. And so we're going to use 2 observation documentations that are in your textbook. The first one is on page 47, Wrestling the Wind. And the second one is on page 49, Anthony and the Paintbrush. We're going to take, so you need to carefully read the observation documentation on each of these pages. And then use the format on page 221 of your text, which we just looked at in the previous slide, to create a separate 4-perspective table for each of the 2 observations. One for wrestling the wind, and one for Anthony and the paintbrush. So you may not find all of the answers to the questions in the table within that documentation, but you can use what's there to make your best guess regarding some question, as it may not be directly provided in the observation documentation. And so just make your best guess. It may not directly be in there. So there are 10 points possible for each table for a total of 20 points. So include all of the columns and the questions for each column in your 2 tables. Number the questions in each column. So the first column is the child's story, and answer the 6 questions for each table, the one for wrestling the wind, the one for Anthony and the paintbrush. The learning and development story, answer the 8 questions for each table. For question 7, when they say schema theory, what that means is the idea the child is exploring. A schema is an idea. For question 8, in this column, the child learning and development story, make sure that you describe each of the 6 learning domains that are listed there. The third column is the teacher's story. Answer the 7 questions for each table. And then the family story, answer the 4 questions for each table.